let's take a look at this run here. So for the run, one of the big things that I really like is how they move the legs. It's very fast, and they tend to hold a lot. Now, if you actually look at the legs themselves, the whole leg tends to move quite a bit. So you get from this pose here, it comes through, you get the nice straight in there, very nice exaggerated straight here, and then it bends, and you can see the heel keeps moving. But one thing that they're doing to simplify this is that they're keeping the upper leg a lot more simple in the run. So for example, if you look at the upper leg, it stays up. It's still kind of in the same up position. It switches to pointing back, and then it really doesn't move all that much from here. You can see it just slowly eases through all of this before starting to ease back out, and then right across, and then it just holds. So the upper leg is really not moving that much. It's got what, maybe one frame of actually transitioning forward here, and then on the way back, maybe I could say 2 frames transitioning back. The rest is a hold on each side. What this does is it simplifies the action, and instead we focus on the lower leg, and it creates this nice overlapping action. So instead of just the legs constantly, basically it's avoiding this feeling where the leg and the lower leg are just kind of moving all together all the time. Instead you get this kind of fast motion there, fast overlap, fast overlap, fast overlap, fast overlap. So this part moves very quickly and very little, and it leaves more room to focus on the lower leg and get that nice overlapping action. Now, this isn't to say that the lower leg is just constantly moving like it's on a loose hinge, but you get that little bit of contrast in there. Now the arms are moving in a nice arc. If you watch, especially this hand here, it's kind of moving in an arc this way, in a circle. It goes forward and up slightly, then down, and up and back. So it's doing something like this, kind of a bean shape arc to that hand. Very nice. Great overlap in the hair. As she comes down, all her hair kind of expands outwards and upwards before you get this nice everything curling back in. Drag and then overlap. Very nice. And what I really like is they're using, again, I know I mentioned this while we were playing, but there's not that many pixels in this. It's very subtle in terms of how much visual information is in here, but they're using it very well. So for example, they're using the pixels on her shirt, that little yellow line, to show the twist in the body. You can really feel that twist happening in here, which is very nice. It really adds that sense of weight to the character. And like, for example, right here, you can really feel that body twisting around and dragging the arm forward. Same thing here. That body twisting around, comes through, and you get that little bit of motion in the body there. It's a great character design. They could have easily designed her without that stripe, just a red shirt, but it would have been much harder to animate that motion side to side. Great crawling animation. You get the contact right there, and then the flat. Same as Vanilla Walk. But they're really pushing their straights So for example here, you're getting a little bit of a straight in that arm, a little bit of a straight here, before everything curls really tightly and then straightens out. Now it's not going into a full straight, but it's still contrasting a lot compared to where it was before, which makes it read very nice and clearly. And for the backhand, they're just making sure to raise it up very, very high. Excuse me. I thought I got enough sleep last night. Apparently not. As she comes up, there's really only one frame of in between from the crawl to the stand. It's right here, which is a nice contrast. You feel the hips come down as the head goes up. Normally, when people would, if people would kind of approach this, everything would just come up right away because, well, the character's standing. So the hips have to go up, the head has to go up. But instead, they made sure to bring the hips down in anticipation to then bring the character up. Even though it snaps in one frame, when you're playing, you don't really notice that, but you do feel that anticipation. And that makes it feel, alive. If she just kind of pops straight up, that would make it feel a little bland. Let's see, what other shots do we have here? Okay, I think I was just testing. Right there. Okay. Gotta analyze the jump. So jumps in games are always fun to analyze for me. Just because mechanically they don't usually work the same way we would normally animate jumps. Mostly because you have to skip the anticipation. With most jumps, if you're animating it in any other scenario, you would be making sure to really push the anticipation of the jump and then go into the jump. A video game, very rarely do you get anticipation to a jump. Most of the time, the game engine will just push the character. As soon as you hit the button, it pushes the character up into the air. It uses a force attribute to push the character into the air, which means your character is already in the air. And that can cause, well, a lot of issues because, well, there's no anticipation. So it just kind of looks like the character floats off. So creating a good push-off pose is very important so that it reads clearly. Now in here, really all they're doing is making sure that you get this nice high knee in there. And this straight. Really pushing that line of action in there. Even though the body is so small and the head is so big, you're still getting that nice straight with the one arm kind of dragging back and the other one forward. So you get this nice twist in the body. You can see it right there. So you get this nice flow right through there before she comes down, and you get the reversal. And it's really only 3 frames or 4 frames. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. So the whole jump is 4 frames of animation, which is not much really for the amount of time she's actually in the air. Just having 4 frames go through. And they do a good job of leading with the arms here and then letting the legs kind of take over and the arms kind of drag back up. Very nice. Now another trick to animating jumps in games that I've seen a lot of, or not, I shouldn't say a lot, but quite a few games do. If you don't have if the game engine doesn't allow you to add the anticipation, is on the actual jump frame here, as they're going up, they're actually going to create an anticipation in there. So the character might start jumping on this very first frame, and they're going to be in the air, but their pose is actually going to be the anticipation pose. So they're going to crouch down and go down as if they're going to anticipate, but they're still moving up in the air. It's a visual trick. If it goes fast enough, you don't register that they kind of just floated up, but you still register that there was an anticipation. So that has to be done with care, because it can kind of screw things up if you're not careful in terms of spacing, but that can work at times. Let's see. What other clips do we have here? Sparkle effects are really nice. Oh yeah, this was the hanging. Even that the cycle here, it's so well done. The weight of it. Look at it as it comes up. You get the arms, or the whole body coming up, then the arms overlap, and the arms are the things that lead back down here. Arms start, which then pushes the whole body down. Whole body comes down, and then you can feel it push into the knees. Then the head stops, and you get this little bit of a overlap right through in there. It's so nice and subtle. Okay. Here's what I want to see. So she grabs on. Now this is something very common in games, is the link between two animations is not quite perfect, which sometimes you can't avoid because all the different scenarios, it's hard to account for them all. So in this case, she's falling, her body is kind of way down here, but then when the animation for hanging onto the edge kicks in, it resets her back into place. When we're playing, we kind of just accept it, and if you see it at full speed, you can see that it doesn't really stand out that much, oddly enough. You'd think it would stand out more, but it doesn't. We can get away with a lot of that in games, where sometimes things don't quite line up. That's fine. Now, the more realistic you go, that's harder to get away with. So, for example, if you're doing something like Red Dead Redemption or Last of Us, where things are very realistic, you can't just get away with having random things happen for no reason. You kind of have to build in even more. And this is the drawback to AAA games nowadays, is if you look at the development cycle of games, they're getting longer and longer and longer because games are getting more complex. It used to be that a AAA game, honestly, like, the animations weren't that great, and the stuff in the world was very simple. You look at Ocarina of Time, for example, which was an amazing game. Like, it's one of my favorites. In comparison to games nowadays, there's not much to it. You could have a AAA game that was developed by a team of 20 or 30 people, tops. Nowadays, a AAA game, like the really high-end AAA games, it's teams of hundreds of people, because there's just so much complexity that goes in. Just the animators alone, the amount of animations they have to do nowadays compared to before, where you would just literally have your character walking around and then, oh, your character died, and they just boop and fall over. That's it. Now it's these intricate things that every scenario has to be accounted for. It's very tricky. And it makes things much longer and much more difficult to do. So Is that a bad thing? No, it's just a change. Now, going back to the swing here, we get this nice ease of the hips. You can see right there, it's just this very little ease. The legs are kind of leading here. This one going up this way, this one swinging down. The hair is overlapping very nicely here. And then you get the swing. Nice reversal. So here, if you look at the line of action of the body, you get this nice clear reverse C. And then here, very nice C curve. Then you get into the S curve here for reversing again. So getting this very nice pendulum effect right there. She stops a little abruptly here. If there was enough time, it would be nice to have another swing, but then that starts to fall into having animations last a little too long for the gameplay. If she's swinging and just kind of slowly penduluming to a stop, what that's going to end up doing is just wasting the player's time. So instead, she swings and then it just stops. But they don't just let it freeze. As she stops, they continue with a little bit of an easing motion through here. And you can see even after she stopped, there's this little swing right here, right at the end. This keep alive. What's the next one we have here? I like the leaves. It's just a little piece of square geometry, but it feels so good. I'm not sure what this one was. Let's actually take a look at the explosions here. This is actually really cool. Look at that. This is a wonderful smear frame. So it's really just using the same asset 4 times. It's just one explosion effect, and then they copy it over. But look at the beautiful smears. And it's not just the smears like, let's change color here. Not just the smears in terms of the lines coming up here, but imagine all of these different elements are just cubes. And Animation Giant, thank you so much for the follow. Really appreciate that. Thank you. So imagine all of these are kind of just cubes, which really they are. All of these little things are just cubes. And instead of just creating them flat and then smearing them down with a few lines of paint and color, what they're doing is that they're using the cubes themselves to show directionality. So for example, as everything is coming out here, everything is pulling off of that center line. So if you have a line like this, the cube is pulling off this way from it. So it's moving with that line or off of that line versus just everything sticking out straight. And it creates this very nice dynamic directionality to things. They're also using kind of in terms of the perspective, they're shaping the cube so it makes it feel round instead of just a bunch of cubes all going out in this kind of flat direction. They are curving it so you get a little bit more of a face here, a little less over here, a little less over there. So it's rounding out around the surface. It feels like a round surface. It's a very simple, when you say it like that, it's, oh yeah, it's simple, but it creates this very dynamic effect that really just holds for a few frames before fades away, and then you just kind of smush it here. And you can see it's just kind of flattening the image, actually. Yeah, that's all it is. It's one image that slowly gets squashed down. And then it actually reverses here. You can see right there. It's just flipping. It's like the pivot point of the image is over here. And then it's just scaling to 0 and then back the other side. That's all it is. And then you get these nice little smoke effects here. That's a little bit more complex, where there's actual frames. Let's see here. Look how simple this is. So you go to open the box, you get one pose where the character turns around. Let's switch colors here again. One pose where the character turns around, and then the character flips back forward, and right into that. So the actual opening of the chest is very simple. Just tuk. And then you get the nice little animation of the jump here, really pushing that line of action. The contrapposto in the hips and the shoulders right there. And that nice reversal. Right there. And then even as she lands, they push a little overlap, or I should say overshoot, where the body bends even more this way as she lands before bouncing back. The posing is so good. Even with the few pixels that they have here, they're doing a great job of really pushing the legs to be dynamic. So you can see that the feet kind of point inwards. It kind of gives this slightly awkward effect to it. But it gives the character a lot of character, versus just having straight, and just something like this. Like that's okay, but by having that kind of bean body shape there, and then pushing the feet to be ever so slightly pigeon-toed like that, and the arm is a little higher, so a little straighter up there. You can see how that just adds so much more personality compared to the other one. It just feels more like a character than just a arm up, yay, success. Now there's a lot of different ways you could do that, but really it just depends on the character that you're trying to animate. And then just right there. Even taking out the gun, it's very fast. So she just one frame, the gun's out. It's cool that they even have like perspective on the gun. So for example, here as it's going up, you can just see a little bit of the bottom of the gun there, and then as it comes down, it just rounds out here and you get a flat edge. That's cool. They could have easily just done that with a sprite, where the sprite just kind of moves around with the arm, but they actually animated different perspectives of the gun based on where you're aiming, even here. That's really cool. And that's actually a really cool pose, like when she's aiming up. Actually, look at that. So this is an interesting little thing. Usually in games, sprites are made up of panels. So especially older games, when you look at boss characters, for example, big characters, or even player characters, if they're bigger on screen, a lot of times it doesn't mean that they're one image. We kind of assume that, oh, for example, Mario, he's on screen, he's one image. Sometimes it's two. So you'd have the top half of the body kind of as one sprite image here, and then a second one would be the lower half of the body. And you see this with bosses a lot of times. So boss characters, the ones that kind of fill the screen in old NES or SNES games, all they are a collection of square panels. that all fit together to create a big character. But it's all separate sprites. If you actually look at the data set, they're all separate. Now, why is that important? Well, when you have tall characters, like her, for example, usually what needs to be done is that you have these two square boxes that create the character. Now, the reason this is important is watch what's happening right here. She's split. You have the body there and then there. There's a split in the character. The two sprite panels have shifted ever so slightly for some reason right there. She's actually being disconnected from herself. And then took back into place. So interesting. It's almost like the top half of the body rotated to aim screen left, whereas the hips stayed looking screen right. There was kind of a disconnect in information there, because it feels like if the hips were to be the other way, it would reconnect everything correctly. Let's see, what other animations do we have here? Oh yeah, this was the surprise animation. Now actually, here's a note on the hanging animation that we talked about earlier. They're actually repurposing this. So this is where, again, when we talk about games having more development time and kind of getting longer, when we saw her hang from an edge, there was that moment where she just stopped and then she just kind of stayed there. Well, here she's going, she's overlapping and hanging onto an edge that is against a wall. Now this animation makes sense. You're not going to pendulum and just swing to a stop if you're leaning against a wall. You're going to bounce off the wall. So what they could have done was they could have written a bunch of variables, basically saying that if there's a wall and the character's hanging, to play one animation. If it's on an edge, like just a little overhang, and there's no wall section underneath it, that should play another animation. That's a lot of work to go through your entire game and section off which hanging sections will require one set of animation versus another, to connect them all properly, make sure that all works, and then to animate a whole other set of animations just for one scenario. So what they did was they just animated one animation that would fit with both. Is it going to be perfect for both? No, because technically one of them is going to be slightly wrong. It's just how it's going to be. But that's fine because, well, it saves time and you don't really need the other animation. Not really. It's more of a cosmetics thing. I just realized that the little loading symbol here is the little soldier. Comes out and gives a salute. You even get a little smear frame right here. That's a great fall animation. She hits the ground and you just see the legs go up in the air and then come back down. And look at that curve. So this is something that we talked about before, which is shaping a curve. So throughout this whole kind of landing, she stays in a C curve. She hits here and you can see there's this curve right there, and it never reverses. It just kind of stays in that C curve. Now, that could lead to boring animation. If you have a character stuck in one curve, like that, let's make it proper curve. So just like that. And then they stay like that for a whole section of animation. That can be very boring. So the way they make it interesting is that they have the curve progress. And what I mean by progress is that they change the weight of the curve. For anyone who doesn't know, the weight of the curve is where kind of the peak of the curve is. So instead of constantly just being curve, 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 where it's just doing this, you can see how boring that becomes. They are instead having the weight of the curve kind of start in the middle. And then they are pushing that weight to be... Let's actually animate this properly. So I'm going to turn on onion skinning, and let's do that over here. So they're pushing that weight. So the weight is right here. And then they're pushing it over and to the bottom. So as it comes through, they're just pushing where the straight part of the curve is. So the weight changes, and you can see just by doing that how that feels more dynamic suddenly. It's still just moving sideways, but now there's a change to it versus this one where the curve is just sliding forward or spinning. And it's simply because the weight of the curve is moving through the curve. And that's what they're doing here to get her to stand up, and then they build that into a reversal here. The question box here is just one image that just stretches and squashes. Got a little nice overlap and overshoot right there. Boop. Great anticipation here. So she anticipates up, leg comes up here, anticipate, and then just in one frame, right down. And what really makes this feel nice is the arms contrasting upwards still. Instead of the whole pose just popping down, you still feel the arms coming up. Gives that nice solid hit. And then afterwards, a frame after, then they start to come down. That's an awesome reaction. So you have the anticipation. I love how the knees, they kind of feel like they're slightly pointed inwards here. She's got her feet tend to point inwards a lot of the time. So you've got that. And then in one frame, it just goes right the other way. And the eyes are just 1 pixel. Then right into this super tight pose. That is awesome. Everything, even the arms coming in. This is fantastic contrast. So they're reversing the curve here. You can see that how the entire curve of the body reverses. Even from here, this is a little bit more of a kind of S-ish curve through the whole thing. Then it goes into a C curve, then a reverse C, before collapsing back into a C curve here. And J Gold, hello! It's going well, how are you? And it just holds. Before everything goes wrong. And then it plays the same animation again. I even like how they bring her up into the air. It makes no sense physically that she would jump up into the air and then come down, but it works. It it really sells that shock of the character. Let's see, what else have we got here? I really like, I believe, yeah, Black's animations. They're just so nice and subtle. Just the little breaths here and there. The little shifts in the body, like the character just slightly leaning forward. You've got the arms kind of coming in before going out, which is really nice. This music is very heavy, I will say. I had to switch radio stations recently, and so far, not a huge fan of this one. Not that I don't like this kind of music, but for streaming and for trying to analyze animation, it's a little intense. I might have to look for a new radio station. Have you seen anything from Sony's showcase yesterday? I saw a little bit of it. I didn't get a chance to really dive in and look at a bunch of the stuff. It looks like there's some really cool things in there. Look at that. Look at that awesome smear frame in the arm. They don't really need to do that, but it makes all the difference. It does give it a lot of energy. Definitely this music is going to wake me up. I am not going to be yawning with this going on in the background. Nice smear. And he just really slides forward. His body just kind of gets a little bit more of a lean and he slides forward. Oh, that would be really cool to analyze some of those. Oh, Kenna Bridge of Spirits. Yeah, a lot of... there's actually some... They might still be in here. There's some animators from Kenna Bridge of Spirit in the stream right now. There's a bunch of AM alumni, so Animation Mentor alumni, who are working on that right now, which is really cool. I'm really excited to see that game, just because so many people I know worked on it, which is really weird and awesome at the same time. Weird in the good way. It's just... I have to kind of remind myself, like, I live in rural Manitoba all my life. It's like farmland and prairies, and to think like I actually know people who work on video games, it's weird. That should not be a thing that I know based on where I live. It is not a place for kind of video game or movies or stuff like that. You're supposed to know the farmer or the person at the gas station or the person who works in the woods. The power connection, exactly. He's got a great overlap in his head. He walks with this swing to his head. It's very nice. He watches just his head motion. And why didn't I realize this before? Does he have two pairs of glasses? Like, he's got his green glasses right here, but does he have another pair that are sitting over on his forehead? Is that really what I'm seeing? I think it is. He's literally got two pairs of... No, he's got three. He's also got a pair hanging around his neck. He's got 3 pairs of sunglasses. How did I miss that last time? I don't know anyone who has worked on a published video game. I know like 5 people who started to work on one. Nice. That's cool that they're working on a game like that. As you get more and more into the animation industry, you start to get to know people like everywhere. At this point, I probably know people who work in pretty much every major studio. And major game company, which is very weird to think about, because that's something I never expected when I started animation, was to know people around the world and everywhere. It's always fun now to look at credits for things, because more than likely I'm going to recognize the name of at some point in the credits. Even watching Green Eggs and Ham. Like, I'm a CG animator. I do most of my stuff in CG. So video games, I'll recognize names there. Movies, if there's CG or VFX, I'll probably recognize a name in there. 2D animation, not so much. That's just not one of the things that I've never studied 2D. A lot of the people I know never really studied 2D. Watching Green Eggs and Ham, there were two names in there that I kept seeing in the credits that I know those people. I talked to them. One of them I actually helped during their time in Animation Mentor, which was really weird to see their name in Green Eggs and Ham, and they were doing background design, which was really cool. That point again. It's one of the fun things in the industry is getting to see everyone's successes. It's awesome to see the growth of high fidelity animation animators in games and not just films. Exactly. Games is such a big field now, and to be honest, games have such good animation nowadays. It used to be, if you were a games animator, it typically meant that you worked on lesser grade animation. Now, this is not to say it was bad projects or anything, but you look at, again, Ocarina of Time. The animation there is okay compared to TV and film. Even if you go kind of further into the future, most games, compared to the films that were being made at the time, they were much lesser quality in terms of the animation. Things were stiff, things just didn't work as well. Nowadays, especially because of cinematics in games, like the new Ratchet and Clank trailer that they released, that's like feature quality animation there. That is not game animation. That is animation, pure and simple. It is not simplified. It is not toned down. It is marvelous and beautiful and so good. Game animation is on par, like, if in terms of skill level and the amount of polish and animation detail that you get to put in, it is on par with films, and that is so cool to see now. I love that little pose there. The posing is really good, and again, I know I keep repeating this, but for the few sprites that are the amount of pixels that they have to work with, they're doing a great job in utilizing them and really pushing the poses. A couple of friends of mine produced a game. I would like to share their trailer and hear your opinion. Am I allowed to share it here with you? Oh, definitely. Let's see. I think there was one more animation that I really wanted to take a look at here. Now, technically, there's a bunch of animations we could look at, but which one was it? Was it this one? No, too far. Castlevania. Castlevania has such good music. Okay, it was right here. Jumping in bed. Bleep. So nice. As she jumps up, her head isn't the thing leading the action, it's her hips and her legs. Those come up as the head just slightly raises up. The arm really swings through. And then she just kind of floats sideways a little bit. So we get this, a little bit of a curve here, but instead of just lining up flat and then lying down, they make sure to hold this line, this angle of the pose, and then it hits. And to push it even more, the body flattens out, but the hips come up. So that way the hips can now flatten, and you get this kind of reversal here, very slight. So you're going from this curve to that one, and then it settles in. And you get this very nice silhouette in the body. Great motion here as well, leading with the head, legs kind of leading in front of the body. She sits up, you get this really nice reversal in the curve. Nice ease. Head overlapping. Great posing. A lot of this really comes down to the posing. For anyone who is starting in animation, one of the biggest things that you can learn early on is that posing is key. So when you're first starting out, it's very easy to kind of fall into trying to create really awesome arcs and really cool spacing and timing. Those are all really good. They're super important in terms of animation because that's what makes things animated. But even before that, before you get to any of that, you want to make sure that your posing is solid. A good pose is going to make everything else much easier. If you have boring poses, or if your poses just aren't interesting to look at, no matter what you do to the animation, it's just not going to be interesting to look at. It's not going to be fun or dynamic or visually interesting. Hey Sylvia, hello! Welcome. And Sylvia, look, we've got the game's layout working. Yay! And it's even got, thanks to Sin, the custom font for the music. Yay! It's all working. Let's see. Was there one more animation that I wanted to take a look at? I think there was. Which was Mina here. Because I seem to remember, yeah, the smear frame. So as she kind of comes through, you get this really nice kind of punchy smear frame, and the way they push it really nicely is that they just flip the character. Look at that line of action in that pose there. The other thing that they're doing is really pushing the simplicity versus the complex. So they could easily just kind of pose this out and have a pose that is kind of, let's say you do the body here and then the hips come out, and then you have let's say, oops, keeping it on hockey here, the leg kind of like this. You could have a pose like that, and then the other leg could be something like this. But visually, that doesn't tell us much because it's kind of designed in a way that there's no clear line. So on the front, we get a little indent here, and then out there, and then out here. So it's kind of doing this. On the other side, we're doing the same thing. Like that. There's no clear directionality to this. That's not what they're doing here. If you look at the body, the way they're pushing it, there's just this very clear line. Solid line. Right there. No breaks in it. This makes this very strong. Then the other side, they are really pushing the visual contrast of it. So you get the line of the back into the hips, into the leg, into the lower leg. So you have this zigzag pattern versus the straight. And this creates that visual, clear, dynamic pose that then allows us to switch, and you basically go from here into this nice straight, which then kind of slightly curves. So it's reversing right there. Look at that beautiful smear. Goes through, you get that smear all the way through there. Then it kind of tapers off just for a few frames before gone. And again, very strong posing. Now, very different posing. This character keeps her toes out compared to the other character. So, and this is a very interesting overlap where she's doing this full shoulder motion. You can really feel that the shoulder here moving a lot, but this hand stays in place, so it keeps the arms from feeling like they're doing this all the time. One hand is kind of staying straight, and then the other one is overlapping that action. So it creates this really nice dynamic flow to the character versus just having the arms kind of sticking in place or just twisting the body in an odd way.